How's this for an offer you can't refuse? How would you like to live, say, 400 or 500 years, or even more, and all of them in perfect health? It's both a utopian and a nightmare scenario. But there are those who say it's quite possible. Though we live longer and healthier lives than our grandparents, 100 is more or less the outer limit, because catastrophic disease aside, we just plain wear out. But one scientist is getting a lot of attention. He says that's old-fashioned thinking, that sometime in the next 20 or 30 years or so, we'll be able to recondition ourselves for the first steps towards immortality. We begin our journey to the outer limits with a gentle trip down the River Cam, floating by that center of British learning, Cambridge University. My guide and helmsman, Dr. Aubrey de Grey. He ponders while he punts.
When I was a student, I bought my own punt, second-hand one, for a few £100s, and I used it in the summer to do what's called chauffeur punting. People come along, tourists, and you tell them lies for money.
Today he's pondering his favorite premise, eternal youth. When most scientists talk about increasing longevity, they're talking about another good, say, 5, 10 years.
That's right.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about indefinite extension of longevity.
Average lifespan of, say, 100 years?
Average lifespans would be in the region of 1,000 years.
1,000 years. I mean, seriously, 1,000 years.
Seriously.
De Grey and his wife Adelaide are fixtures around Cambridge. She's a researcher in genetics. He's an academic maverick. While still in his early 30s, he published groundbreaking work in theoretical biology, giving him an international reputation. His day job is managing a fruit fly database. But the work that consumes him involves larger game, us. And he does his best thinking here, in the same 17th century pub where Watson and Crick refreshed themselves while unlocking the mysteries of DNA. De Grey believes he's unlocked the mysteries of immortality.
The aging process is really a build-up of side effects of being alive in the first place.
De Grey's identified the biological processes he thinks are responsible for aging, including the mutations that cause cancer and the gradual buildup of useless, toxic junk. This accumulation of junk within the cells lead to what?
It depends on the tissue. In the eye, there is a type of junk that accumulates in the back of the retina, but eventually it causes us to go blind. It's called age-related macular degeneration. In the arteries, you have a different type of cell which accumulates a different type of junk that eventually causes atherosclerosis.
But De Grey has gone way beyond describing the causes of degeneration. In a series of papers, he's developed a theory he calls engineered negligible senescence. Simply put, it says science will soon enable us to grow old without aging. All of these conditions, the junk, the mutations, can be avoided or prevented or something.
They certainly can't all be avoided or prevented yet, but I do claim that we have a fighting chance of developing ways to prevent them within the next 25 years or so.
So we're just as spry at 500, say, as we were at 25?
That's right. If you have difficulty imagining this, think about the situation with houses. With moderate maintenance, they stay up, they stay intact and habitable, more or less forever. It's just that we have to do a bit of maintenance to keep them going. And it's going to be the same with us.
He's talking about something that doesn't exist.
Dr. Jay Olshansky studies longevity and aging at the University of Illinois in Chicago. He says De Grey's predictions are more science fiction than science.
Currently, life expectancy in the United States is roughly about, well, it's 80 for women, about 75 for men. They're talking about numbers that are simply way beyond comprehension.
Olshansky goes on to say, we're simply not built to last.
From an evolutionary perspective, we're designed to make it, to grow and develop and to reproduce, pass our genes on to the next generation, and ensure the reproductive success of our offspring. So, early 60s, one might argue, is where evolution has us surviving optimally. But we go well beyond that, well beyond the end of our reproductive period. So it's no surprise that we see things go wrong with these bodies when we use them beyond their warranty period. And that's exactly what we're doing.
My conclusions about people living to 1,000 and so on are very extreme. And so the natural reaction is to say, well, this can't possibly be right. But then if you look at my reasoning, how I get to those conclusions, it becomes very much harder to actually identify anything that I'm saying that is unreasonable.
Would you compare such critics with those who believed that the Earth was flat and continued to believe it even though it was only theoretically proven that it was round?
I think that's a pretty good parallel, yes.
DeGray says that what you're saying reflects only the knowledge and wisdom of the past, that you haven't even calculated, haven't even contemplated the kinds of breakthroughs that science inevitably will make.
I have no doubt science will make breakthroughs, but how do you develop a model or a forecast of life expectancy based on a technology that doesn't exist?
But DeGray insists that it will exist soon enough. Our success in mapping the human genome will produce amazingly rapid strides in technology, smart drugs designed for individuals, gene therapies to cure hereditary disease, and stem cells that rejuvenate organs like the heart and brain. And beyond that, microscopic robots that travel through our bloodstream, curing what ails us. Progress will be such that each generation will keep us one step ahead of the Grim Reaper.
The first generation therapies will give us maybe 30 extra years of healthy lifespan. So the beneficiaries of those first therapies will still be around to benefit from improved therapies that will give them another 30 or 50 years, and so on. And so this is basically staying one step ahead of the problem.
A lot of people, when I talk to people about this story and suggest the possibility of living 500,000 years, they say, God, no, who wants that?
What I'm after is not living to 1,000. I'm after letting people avoid death for as long as they want to.
And he acknowledges that immortality will not come cheap.
We are talking about serious expenditure here. We are talking about expenditure in excess of what's being spent on the war in Iraq, for example.
And that money will only be forthcoming when ordinary people become convinced that they have a shot at radical life extension.
The people who are watching this probably still think about serious life extension in the same way that they think about teleportation. You know, they think it's not really foreseeable, and they'll worry about it when it is.
That's where the Methuselah Mouse Prize comes in. It's a multi-million-dollar contest designed by DeGray and others to spur anti-aging research. The goal, to demonstrate that radical life extension is possible by producing a so-called ageless mouse within the next 10 years.
And that is when the real pandemonium is going to happen, because people will want to maximize their chance of making the cut.
Not all mice are created equal, at least not in the laboratory of Dr. Christian Sell, a research scientist at Drexel University in Philadelphia. In a separate facility, his mice come in two sizes, regular and midi. The midi mice are 40% smaller than regular mice because one gene has been altered.
You can see within here our mice have the normal gene and the altered gene.
Obviously, this guy is normal,
Right.
and this little guy has been altered.
Exactly.
The altered gene, one that all mammals, including humans, have, regulates a hormone called IGF-1 that affects an animal's size. If the gene is active, a lot of the hormone is produced and the animal grows large. A less active gene produces less of the hormone and a smaller animal. Dr. Sell hopes to prove that the gene also affects longevity. If he's right, his smaller mice with less of the hormone will live longer than the 2 to 2.5 year average of their larger cousins.
Small seems to live longer within your own species. Across species, small is shorter. Mice live shorter than elephants.
Yes.
But within mice, the smaller mice seem to live longer. Within dogs, smaller dogs live longer.
So a Great Dane versus a Chihuahua,
Right.
the Chihuahua will win every time.
And the Chihuahua has much less of this hormone than the Great Dane does.
One could conclude that this hormone produced by this gene is the longevity hormone.
Why don't we say it's a longevity gene? Because there may be more, there's certainly more than that.
3 years into his research, Sell's midi mice are living longer than the control group. But it's too soon to tell if one of them will break the record of almost 5 years and win the Methuselah Prize. Aubrey de Grey wants the Methuselah Prize to stimulate research into longevity. Is it having that effect?
It's stimulating discussion. And whether one agrees with the idea that we will be able to intervene to radically extend lifespan or not, well, that's a good point for discussion.
Do you think that fairly radical change in human longevity is a real possibility?
Not in the near term. Not in the near term.
But it's human nature to want to live as long as possible in reasonable health. And Olshansky says there are plenty of snake oil salesmen out to cash in on that desire. For them, he has his own prize, the Silver Fleece Award.
There were a number of claims associated. This was a Silver Fleece Award for my favorite product. You know, I have my favorite, and this one was called Longevity. It says here it drastically slows the aging process. The person who invented it, and many of the people who were listed as having used it, including John Wayne, Yul Brynner, Anthony Quinn, Russian and German party leaders, and many other worldwide dignitaries, all share one common characteristic.
They're dead.
They're dead. They have all died. And so, you know, I just cannot believe.
So what are you saying about guys like de Grey, I mean, who are legitimate scientists?
What I like about Aubrey is he's not selling anything except ideas. He set forth a series of testable research hypotheses, which is what science is all about, and he said, test them. I love that. That is what we should be doing in the world of science. I just wouldn't hold out immortality or 5,000-year life expectancies as the end result or the promise of what you're going to get from this.
But what if de Grey's vision really does come to pass? Are we prepared to deal with a whole new set of problems?
We're talking about saving 100,000 lives a day, and it takes a lot of problems to match that.
But there are those who would suggest to you that those 100,000 lives a day are just in the nature of things. 100,000 lives a day lost, 100,000 new lives created every day.
Yeah, some people do say that. But you know, it didn't stop us from using treatments for infectious diseases when we found out how to develop them.
But can the social scientists keep up with the physical scientists? In terms of a city of 1 million people, that becomes a city of 50 million people, all of them perfectly healthy with no sign of them going anywhere.
Sure, it will be difficult. All I say is that that is a choice that the society of the future that has these therapies at its disposal is entitled to make for itself.